All right, hello. Welcome to the Off by One security stream on July 5th, our first stream of the month. Today we have Elias, also known as All Things Ida on Twitter, of course, who is someone who I just found out has been teaching the Hex Rays class for the last few years, which is awesome. So you're not going to find someone with more knowledge than aside from the developers of Hex Rays themselves. So fantastic opportunity to ask questions about Ida Pro and types of things that you can do with it. And I'm sure reversing questions in general. In just a moment here, I'm going to go through at the start. I'm not going to make you wait till the end. I'm going to announce what's going on with the selected individuals for the contest that I had. Basically, as many of you likely know, I have taken all the YouTube proceeds from the last year and a half, which sadly isn't much. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. But also YouTube members who have signed up, that's completely on their own. That's folks who want to basically donate and contribute to the channel, which is awesome because I'm not taking any of that money for myself. It's all going in return. And in fact, I'm going to be throwing some of my own money into this as well because I didn't want to limit it to just one person. If possible. And then also, of course, some donations a couple people have thrown at us has been very, very helpful as well. So that being said, let me give a little bit of, and it's being recorded. We'll put it up on YouTube. First off, again, we have Elias on All Things Ida. We're going to get to the focus of the stream here in just a moment. But let me go through a little bit of information here about the contest that we had and what that means and what the results are. Let me pull that up if I can find it. Of course, it's not going to be easy for me. There it is. Sweet. Okay, so there were at the last, I guess, few days, we reached over 100 submissions, which it's funny at first, I wasn't getting many submissions at all. And then I hit up a couple people like Chompy and others like, hey, can you retweet this? Because I think more people would want to at least, put their name in. And then we got up to 100, just about maybe 103 or 104. So quite a bit to go through. And from all over the world, I mean, like Singapore, Pakistan, India, Kenya, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Canada, United States, like everywhere, which is pretty awesome as well. There are various factors, like many different factors as to why I selected who I selected. And one of my mods worked with me on this as well. And the factors were everything from the cost of the flight and how I can stretch the dollar as much as possible to get hotel, flight, entry, all the things. Luckily, I was selected as a DEF CON speaker this year, so I get 3 human badges aside from my speaker badge. That allowed me to do more as well. So I'm going to give away 3 badges in this one as part of it. So not just one person will get the thing, but that's one of the factors, though, is the cost, of course, and being able to stretch that. Some flights I was looking at from places after looking at some submissions, and there was some really good submissions. Some of the flights were like $1,500, $2,000, which eats up the entire thing, right? So that was one of the challenges, and I'm hoping that since this is the first year, with more preparation and planning and runway for next year, we'll be able to make that bigger and be able to go bigger than this year. Another factor, speaking on that topic, is visas. Getting visas from some places, I got my lawyer involved, and he was like, yeah, for specifically India, even if you're a high valued individual or executive, minimum 3 weeks on a good day to get a visa, 3 to 4 weeks, with the average for holiday, for vacation, being close to a year, that makes it really challenging, which tells me I need to plan for more runway next year. Same thing with a lot of other countries. I'll talk about a couple of the amazing people who didn't get this time, but were really close and on a mind. So just consider that. There's also a couple folks were under the age of 18, which also makes it hard. Again, talk to my lawyer on that one. Getting a room in a hotel in the United States, a hotel room, is not always the easiest thing to do when you're under 18. You need a parent or a guardian. There's just many, many factors that makes this more challenging than I was hoping it would be. Again, cost of flight and such. I took all the earnings from the YouTube fees, membership fees, donations, and from some very generous folks into consideration for this one. Just to give you an idea as to how awful the YouTube earnings are, I had this channel in September, this coming September, it'll be 2 years since the first video on this channel, and I've only made about $600 in YouTube fees. That's crazy, right? So clearly it's a labor of love and wanting to give back to the community, because you don't get paid much until you get into the hundreds of thousands or millions, where you start to get some collaborations and things if you want to go that path. So when you're a smaller channel like mine, it's only 20,000 something subscribers, you're not really getting very much. Hopefully that'll change so I can give away more. But again, labor of love. There were some strong contenders, and I want to say thanks to everyone who submitted their story. Some people gave paragraphs, some people gave 2 sentences. I mean, come on, try harder there. But paragraphs, I really appreciate you telling your story, and a lot of factors were put into it, a lot of weight and such put into this decision. So I factored in things like your contributions to the community, big or small, any research you've done, published slides, CTF scores, all that kind of stuff, participation, your own personal situation. Obviously, everybody's got their own challenges and such, as well as things like, if you're someone who's gotten a lot of opportunity, that's amazing. If you've gotten scholarships and this and that, like, good for you, keep getting them. But I really wanted to try to find someone who hadn't gotten that kind of opportunity before as well, or at least one of the many factors in the decision. So I've decided to break it up into 3 prizes: first place, second place, third place, if you want to call it that. It's not really a win thing. It's just, who he selected. The first place one gets the flight, the hotel, and the conference admission. Conference admission is $500 alone. So like I said, I got $1,500 in DEF CON badges, thankfully, which allows me to spread this more. So first place, hotel, flight, DEF CON badge. Second place, either flight or hotel and a badge entrance to DEF CON. Because I don't think I can stretch it to get both for second place, but you can get a flight or a hotel. Hopefully second place, maybe you can shack up with somebody who, a friend of yours that's there, right? You can hang out with them in a hotel room. Third place, just entrance to DEF CON. That's all I could do on that one. So you get my third human badge. I know I have friends who are mad at me now who are like, dude, you're giving all your badges away. But I'd rather do it this way. So third place, you get a badge. If you can get yourself there, you got a badge. I'm going to reach out to each of the winners after this so that I can figure out if it's going to work for them and we can make it work. If we can't make it work, I will announce that I'm going to select someone else if we're unable to get that to happen. So, okay. I think that's enough. I will just get this out now, and then we can jump to the topic at hand with Elias, who's waiting patiently, who's been so kind to come on to the stream based on people requesting him to come on. So thank you for that. So winner, first place is going to be Logan Coffee. So Logan, if you're on, I'll be reaching out to you with an email afterward. Why was he selected is the important part, right? Many factors. He's a student at a university. That it always sticks out to me. He's interning as much as he can and gotten some great opportunities through hard work and such. He's done well in rankings for Try Hack Me and various CTFs. He's even working with a school to build a CTF like program. So next year, university students can all do a CTF challenge to start building that as a school. And then the most important thing to me that stuck out, or one of the many things, is that he started a nonprofit to basically help other companies, small companies, other nonprofits who can't afford the very expensive consulting rate for pen testers, because sometimes it's like 50, 60 grand. And he's offering that at a very, very low cost, nonprofit again. And also he's going to offer positions to people who are new to pen testing as a stepping stone into the industry. So it's like a double win there. And I thought that was, really cool that he's doing that. So Logan, Logan's on. Hey there. Cool. I'll reach out to you, Logan. Second place is the person that commented right below Logan, Isla. I'm not going to go into her story. It's very personal. It's not my story to share. So that's up to her if she wants to do that. But if you can figure out either a way to get to DEF CON or a hotel room that I can get you to DEF CON, and you get a badge. So you're going to have to let me know if we can work that out. I'll reach out to you after the stream, and you can let me know if you're going to be able to do that. And then third place is, not place, I hate to say that, but Yetkin. I don't want to pronounce your last name. He's from Turkey. Again, personal story. I don't want to go into the details. Just know that they're both very deserving of this if they can hopefully get themselves out there and stuff. And I can get them in. So, but yeah, Yetkin, I really enjoyed your story. It sounds like you've had a lot of obstacles, and you really deserve to hopefully get there. Same thing with you, Isla. I was very touched by your story and such. So that's it. Next year, I promise we'll get more international because I need more runway. That's the only reason I need more runway. Especially like one guy from Saudi Arabia who spoke at Black Hat at 17 or 16 years old and did a heap exploit demonstrations as such. Like, I was blown away by you. I mean, that's amazing that you're 17 now and have already done all that. So like, you deserve it too. It's just I need more runway. I need to figure this out better for next year. So that is it. Let me stop there. I will reach out to you afterward, and let's jump into the topic of the day. So, Elias, with all of that behind us now, why don't you give a little bit of background about yourself and kind of how you got to where you are?
Yeah. Um, it's a long story. I started reverse engineering back in 1996. Um, when I was a kid, um, I got exposed to IDA, and only around 2002, as a student back in Lebanon, um, I wanted to buy IDA and report bugs. So it was very hard to buy IDA back then, especially probably I was the only client in Lebanon. But back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Finally, I convinced Data Rescue back then to sell me IDA for $250 after student discount. And directly after I bought it, I started submitting bug after bug after bug, until they said, you know what, the support team cannot handle this volume of bugs. Why don't you talk to Ilfaq directly and he can help you? And so I started talking to Ilfaq, and we became friends. Bugs, features, discussions, and so on. And I did express that I wanted to work for them since a long time ago, but it wasn't easy to bring me to Belgium until Hexrays became its own company in 2008, and I was the first employee. So we were only three people in a small company, like a really tiny house. Elfak, myself, and we had a lady called Sandra. She's doing administrative work. We were only three of us for like 3 months until Igor joined us as well, and slowly we started to grow and so on. Um, and during my work at Hexrays, I've done so many features and improvements and so on. But also, I expressed interest in teaching, so I was also training IDA back at Hexrays. And for the past 4 years, except this year as well, I give IDA training. So I would say really I spend a lot of time on IDA, be it in the SDK. I have been exposed to the source code, so I know a lot about the internals,
Wow.
and I keep my skills up to date. And I'm trying as well now to share my knowledge, because when you teach, you improve yourself at the same time. And I really want to make a big collection, or I would say like an authoritative source of everything about IDA, whether it has a large audience or not. That's not the issue. I believe at the end of the day, it will be a big library that people can refer to any point in time. So it's more of a education mission more than anything else.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think it was. Do you know when they switched from Data Rescue to Hexrays?
can you repeat, please?
I think Data Rescue was the original company name,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Sandra, I didn't know she was there so early on. She's amazing. So,
Yeah, yeah. Data rescue was interesting, but the previous CEO was always busy to do the paperwork. So when I say, "Hey, can you help me work there?" he'd say, "Ah, the roof is leaking, or I have some issues." Like always an excuse. But when Ilfaq took over Hexrays, immediately within 3 4 months, my paperwork were done, and I managed to join as the first employee.
oh wow, that's great. That's awesome. So, folks online, if you have questions, please do submit them as always. That's get a lot of value out of it when you ask those questions. I did get one question early, and I ask this question always when I speak to someone who uses a specific tool for reversing. What is it about IDA Pro and Hexrays decompiler and such that makes you stick with that one?
Yeah, as you know, IDA was probably its only tool of its kind, with its interactivity and so on. So back before IDA, I would say I was using something called Sourcer, the DOS program that does listing. It's not necessarily interactive. I use Soft Ice, Turbo Debugger, and so on. But when I discovered IDA back in 3.85, I love the fact that you can document things and change the layout and like really control everything. And if we go forward until 2019 or 2015, when let's say Binary Ninja was announced or Ghidra was announced, if you've been using IDA since 1996, for example, it's hard to switch away. So it's more, I have nothing against all those tools, especially Ghidra is open source, for example, but the muscle memory, all the knowledge about the SDK and the workflow is hard to shift to another tool unless I have a reason. And so far, I'm pretty much satisfied. If there's something that IDA cannot do out of the box, I can just simply write a plugin or extend IDA. So it's just because it's fulfilling all my needs, I stick with it.
Yeah, totally makes sense, and I agree with you. IDA was the first one that I used, and you just get really used to it, and the power with the obviously scripting with IDA Python and the plugins and C++ and such, and also the annual plugin contest. I mean, that really inspired me, and just it's been out for so long that there's just so much history, rich history and contribution and such there, that it's one of the things that makes me hard to break away from it. But I was definitely really impressed with Binja's UX or UI last time I saw it. It is really sharp. I like it a lot. Cool. Thanks, Logan. Appreciate it. And congratulations again. Cool. So tell me a little bit about some of the things we're going to walk through in this session.
I was thinking to talk about techniques to increase your productivity if you're writing plugins or using IDA in general. Let's say you run into some pieces of code you want to emulate really on the spot, or things to speed up IDA workflow in general. But I'd be more than happy to answer generic questions as well if they show up during the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll definitely moderate that and see as they come up. Yeah, I guess one example too, like I've used it a lot successfully with IDA scripting for finding vulnerabilities through static analysis. Like for example, Greg Linares, Laughing Mantis on Twitter, years ago found an unsafe DLL load vulnerability in Windows 10, and Skype was vulnerable, and Edge and a couple other things. And there was I think the DLL was called phoneinfo.dll, and what made it vulnerable is the fact that the DW flags argument for the DLL loading was set to 0, which meant it'll search the path, it'll search the local directory and all that kind of stuff, which is vulnerable, of course. And also the DLL was missing from the file system. So I took that knowledge, such a simple bug, vulnerability, and I wrote an IDA Python script that basically just looked at any program that called load library, the load library suite of functions, and then checked the DW flags argument. And if it was one of the arguments were bad or vulnerable, then it would then search the file system to see if that DLL existed on the system. And I found maybe 2. I mean, it's not that many, but it was like 20 lines of code. I mean, that's where the real power comes in, like you said, automation to increase your productivity. So absolutely. So same thing. Sorry.
I would just like to add a bit about my background in general. I don't do exploit development. I don't have experience in exploit development. My knowledge is mainly, I would say, a generalist, but with more focus on Windows. So when I use IDA, usually I have a specific target, for example, fully reverse engineer program and go back to source code and so on. Less than trying to get a quick answer, more than like fully document the whole system. So I really find pleasure in opening a binary and documenting it fully, and like this kind of obsession to make it look as nice as possible, but no exploitation experience.
Yeah, absolutely. The total sense. I mean, it all intersects all of this stuff. I mean, for example, I've got someone coming on in a couple of weeks to talk about micro processors and architecture, and does not do vulnerability stuff at all. But like that knowledge is exactly what people who want to do vulnerability research need to know. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. There was one other one I wrote. It was like a use after free. Like once you understand how C++ smart pointer implementation works with Microsoft applications, you can just script up in a few lines of code and find use after free vulnerabilities. I mean, I don't know. I haven't found the ability to do that nearly as easy in other disassemblers out there. I could be proven wrong, but it's hard to get away from IDA because it's an amazing tool. Great. So let's go ahead and put you up on the screen here and you can start showing some things. And again, folks who are watching, there's a few hundred people on already. Please do ask questions as you have them, and I'll get them over to Elias. Cool, looks great.
So yeah, I would like to start with Q scripts. Now, for those who don't watch the channel and so on, maybe it's the first time you hear about Q scripts. It's a plugin I done 4 years ago, and it's supposed basically to improve the workflow of script development. So if we open IDA, for example, and we press Shift F2, let's increase the font here. This is usually one way to write scripts. We have the snippet window and we write stuff. And this is not going to be sustainable when we write a lot of things. So it's okay to do some prototyping here, for example.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be good enough when we want to write something way bigger and write a framework or a big, for example, the obfuscation library and so on. So this is the snippet window. You can add so many things here and keep on adding those snippets. You can switch between the snippets and run them. One of the things maybe people don't know, for example, so this is the snippet here. I wrote it. I can press Alt R to run it. At the same time, I can also press Ctrl Shift X as long as the window is open. So let's say this does some automation and it might change or add things in the database. As long as this snippet is selected and the window is open, I can always press Ctrl Shift X to re-execute the script. But as I said, this is not going to be sustainable. Like, it's not good enough. So QScripts, on the other hand, it lets me use my editor. So I can have, let's say, a script here. I called it auto. I'm going to open QScripts and activate the script. So we can always insert, add a script. So here I already added this and activate it. Once it's active, we have an icon showing us it's active. I can simply now switch back here and start developing, for example, and hit save. And the moment I hit save, it gets executed. Now, this is powerful when you have a large script. So you can have very complicated logic. All you have to do, instead of switching back and forth between IDA and your editor, all you have to do is just hit save and off you go. Now, this is good, but what about dependencies as well? So many people as well waste time sometime having to, if they have a script that imports another script and so on, you have to reload the imports. So it's not enough here. For example, if I have a dependency here this is a dependency, let's say define function one, and say this is func1. And now here, if I say import dependency and say dep.f1, this is func1. Now, if I change the dependency, normally people might want to exit IDA or type import lib.reload and so on. So here, let's just change this dependency file and hit save. And it automatically, the whole script, the whole main script got executed, but it also made sure to refresh the dependency. And this is very powerful when you're building things. So here I have a framework I'm planning to open source. It is it wraps IDA Python, and this is not necessarily for production use, but I use it internally. It has things that wraps a bunch of stuff like UI helpers, hex reads helper, debugger, binary, things like PE file utilities, pattern matchers, and so on. And let's suppose I'm developing that framework and I want to use it. So here, for example, if we now, how did this file pick up the dependencies and know what to do with it? We have to augment it with a metadata file. And here, for example, this is how the metadata file looks like. So we have to say, we have to give it the reload directive and tell it how to reload things. So simply when we say dep.py is a dependency for this script. Now, whenever this dependency file changes, the following code will be executed, assuring that it will load. Similarly, let's say I'm developing a very complex framework and I want to be able to test the framework immediately within IDA. And so as well, we have a special syntax here where we can specify package base, for example, using the environment variable. So I did specify this framework. I specified the location. And now I simply add them as dependencies. So I say as well how to reload every single dependency in that framework. And here package base, analysis, auto, UA, GDL, flow, etc. Once I have this, now in my test program, for example, I can also leverage the dependencies. So if I import, let's see something useful here. Let's say GDL. Let's see if I have something useful. For example, here gives me a flowchart and gives me all the basic blocks. Very, very simple function. So all I have to do is create the class, give it the function, and simply then get the blocks and print them. So for this, for example, if we want to get this one, and let's say I'm developing it still, so we will try to do, let's say, import this from the dependency. And let's see here, do we have some function? Let's say this function. This is a big function. Let's pick some function. Okay, it has some basic blocks here. All right. And here, for example, I can now test that framework. So here I can say, let's create a class. Here, for example, GDL dot, and we give it the function address. Let's give it idc dot here. And we can now, for example, get the blocks here, blocks. So for b in x dot blocks, and now we should be able to sorted container. Let's install a package. All right, so let's rerun it. All right, so these are the blocks, and here, for example, we can type dir b. Okay, so we can display, for example, b.start ea, b.end ea, and hit save. I have all the basic blocks, for example. Now, supposedly I'm updating my framework. So since this is a work in progress, suppose I change the name of this function to block X. What I have to do is just save this one. Of course, now I have syntax error, but all I have to do is simply then as well update the syntax, and we're back on track. So this is the power of QScripts. It lets me add dependencies and also work with packages, so I can develop bigger code base really quick with my favorite editor.
Yeah, that is really. I have to be honest. I haven't used a ton of that, and now it's something I'm definitely going to be getting back into and studying up more. So.
Yeah. Now, this is not all of it. Now,
Yeah.
we have some people who like to work in native, so they don't want to write Python code, but they want to prototype real quick in C++. We also can use QScripts for that. So I set up QScripts in such a way. So here I'm gonna um, let's make a small function here and show you as well how we can do that native development. So here I'm gonna say message hello world. Now people usually, especially with C++ code, they have to close IDA, start over again. But this is not gonna be optimal if you want to really learn the SDK and do things. So for example, as well, for QScripts, let's see, the way it is set up, is I have to also specify a Python script for QScripts with a metadata file, but the metadata file will describe what we call a trigger file. And a trigger file in this case will point it to be the plugin DLL. So what this will do, it will wake up, it will execute code when we rebuild the database. So this Python script here will only execute and run the plugin only if let's change this to qtests here, only when the trigger file has been updated. So the trigger file is in the IDA SDK bin plugins and the binary file. When we rebuild that native code, then this script will load the plugin, the native plugin. So let me show you what that means. Let's run IDA. Here we have some errors. We're gonna revisit this code in a bit and talk a bit about the decompiler. Come on, build. Let's do that. All right. All right, so let's open some database. All right. So here I have a database, for example, and I want to experiment with the IDA SDK. I set up QScripts to work with, I give you a skeleton. So if we go to the repo in the task scripts, I give you a trigger native. Trigger native teaches us how to have this configuration. So what does it mean? Now this configuration means the moment, first let's activate the script. So all I have to do is open the accompanying script. This is all documented, but I'm showing you the possibilities. So I run this. Now what is active is this script that will help native development. So now all I have to do is switch back to my Visual Studio, for example, and change here some stuff, hit build. And this is the native code execution. So let's say now, I don't know, I want to experiment with the decompiler. Well, this is a very nice scenario. Here I have my main function. I go over initialize the hextrace plugin, get the current function, and decompile the function. Once the function is decompiled, I can access the microcode or the AST, what we call the C3. And so, for example, here, let's see, do we have any function calls? We do have one function call here, and these are helpers. But let's suppose now I want to print all the function calls. So we can say now let's walk this and let's try to print all the calls here. And this is playing with the decompiler. So what we did is, after we decompile the function, we override a visitor that will visit the AST. So here, basically, this is the pseudocode rendering of what would normally be the AST. What we see here is the AST. This is the HR Dev Helper plugin, visualizing the AST. And now, if we want to answer questions for the database, we just simply have to walk that tree. And instead of walking that tree by hand, we have a visitor. And so here, for example, I'm looking for calls. So if I hit F7 or build, now this should print for me all the nodes that have call, like this one, for example. So let's build. And here, for example, it found the call. Here it found the call, and so on. So if I wanted to capture, for example, let's say I want to capture this value for the function. Well, all I have to do is simply do some um, querying. So for example, I have to double check. So let's filter out things. So if it's not call, let's return 0. Now, if it's a call and it's calling an address, so we will say now if the expression, what is being called of type is not an object as well, let's also return 0. Is it type? No, not type, sorry, OP. So now, and then we can say what is being called. So we can try to say here, this is what is being called. And this is native development. I'm doing this as fast as possible. Like there is no time wasted. Just write code, hit build, and it builds. So for example, I want to capture this argument here. And this is useful for automation. Let's say I want to automate extracting keys from the disassembly or the recompilation. So let's display the target here. Here, and let's build. Anyway, I'm not good with live demos. I could be doing something wrong. Sorry, object EA. It's object EA, I think. Yep. All right, let's build it. And follow it. So this is the find pattern, for example. So indeed, we found it. Now, if we want, we can check for the name. We can get the function name. For example, we can say string s get func name, and we can give it the address and what we're calling, for example, and what we want to retrieve, and we can display it here, for example. And s.cstring build, and this is the function we want. Now that we have that function, we can check the arguments and display that value from the arguments as well. So notice, I don't know how the audience do this kind of development, but I can't find a better and faster way to improve my productivity than setting up QScript in native development mode and just write in a simple function called main and hit build, and I'm testing my code. So here, for example, when I teach IDA, let's say I'm teaching people how to use the net nodes, I use this kind of setup because I want to quickly test and change the code. So for example, I set up a native development project with QScripts. And let's say I'm teaching how to work with net nodes. I just paste this piece of code here and I hit build, and it builds. No need to rerun IDA, no need to do anything. And this configuration works for Linux, Mac, etc., and so on. So this is QScripts for regular scripts and native development.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I mean, I like it a lot. I've been using PyCharm with the IDA hooks and doing it that way, but this is definitely faster. What are your thoughts on PyCharm, by the way, with IDA?
I haven't used it, honestly. So what do you use with it mainly? It's an editor. And
Well,
what kind of hooks are you using?
yeah, I mean, well, it's an editor, so it's really easy to obviously get all the introspection from the hexphrase libraries and such, the API into it, which is nice. But also the hook, it's got a client server model basically where you can execute from PyCharm. It throws it over to IDA, executes, you get the results back in your IDE PyCharm, and that's really nice
Okay.
feature of it.
Yeah.
There's some other things that come up, yeah.
Yeah. Well, at least for PyCharms, and you got your Python figured out. But for native development, and if you want to really work in C, C++, I
Yeah.
guess that will fill in that gap.
Yeah, for sure. How do
Any
you find?
questions? Yes, please.
I remember back, I forget his name, Steven something from Australia. You might remember who I'm talking about. But he basically came out. It was the only document back when I wanted to write my first C++ plugin for IDA. He was the only one that basically gave an instruction manual on how to get that set up in Visual Studio, which was a bit of a pain at first for me. But once I got it working, it was great. I haven't seen an update since that version. I think that was back on IDA 6. Do you know of a good resource out there?
Yeah, like to build stuff for IDA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's a good opportunity as well for those who don't watch my channel to show you the IDA CMake project, and you'll see how simple it is to build stuff for IDA. So let's suppose we want to make a Hello World plugin. We're gonna go to the IDA SDK real quick, and we can go to plugins, and let's take Hello. So Hello in the SDK gives us a bunch of examples. It gives us a C++ plugin, an IDC Hello plugin, and a Python plugin. But let's say the Hello CPP, this is the construction of a plugin. And let's say I want to build it real quick. And I'll be honest with you, the way it is with IDA right now, if you don't use the IDA CMake that I made, it's not very easy. So if we look at the documentation, it requires a bunch of things. It requires certain hard-coded passes. So let's say if you installed Visual Studio somewhere else, you will have to edit the defaults.mk file, which is very, very cryptic. So what I'm trying to say, building a plugin for Windows in IDA with the SDK is not very friendly. It's not very friendly. So let's try to do that with IDA CMake. So you go to the repo, you clone IDA CMake inside the SDK. This is what I did here. So this is the SDK here. And you simply clone IDA CMake in the SDK. And then we're gonna go inside the CMake and take a skeleton CMake file. So I took a skeleton CMake file. Let's go back to plugins, hello, and paste that CMake script. And let's edit it. So here, let's change the stuff. So it's hello. Hello is the plugin name, and this is the source file. And that's it. That's all I have to do here. Now all I have to do is simply go to the prompt, make CMake -p build 64, and that's it. So all I did is simply run CMake to configure it for IDA 64. And now we have a Visual C solution.
Nice.
And we should be able to build and test quickly. So here, let's open what. So you have an error. My sample, I still need to edit some stuff, I think. Yeah. Hello. We took a skeleton. We need to update we need to make sure we have changed the stuff as we specialize it. So that's it. All I did is just run the CMake program, and I have a solution file. Now that the same process works as well on different operating systems, but it's much more convenient for Windows. So here we have it. If I hit build, it builds. I can, let's say, put a breakpoint here and run IDA.
Oh, nice.
And now when IDA runs, once we invoke the plugin or wherever, now this run callback will hit when we go to the menu. So I'm gonna press Ctrl+3 and hello world. This is my plugin here, hello world, which is available here. And if I hit it like that, here we have the breakpoints and we are tracing and debugging. So you don't have to do much except just take a CMake script, modify it to add your source files, and off you go.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome.
And for example, you can configure it to have multiple plugins. So here, for example, let's say I have two plugins at the same time. This is first plugin. This is second plugin. And same story, very simple CMake script. Plugin one, we put the name of the project, the source files. If you have more source files, you put the source files here. If you have link directories and so on as well, you can specify them. Everything is documented. And this is, so every time I put a plugin, we call generate and so on. Now, the gist of this really behind the scenes is nothing complicated. All it does is just simply make sure it will set up everything with respect to the SDK. For example, the library files that we need to link against, depending on the operating system. If it's ARM, link with this, the include path. So it's just really, it's not a CMake library in a sense. It's just a macro, a big macro that sets up all the target include directories and target link directories and the definitions, the compile definitions. And that's it. And then it works. So that's how
Gosh,
we can easily build plugins. And yeah.
that's great. Yeah, I have a good IDA plugin contest if somebody wants to enter. Build a plugin that converts IDA Python scripts to a C++ plugin, because I've got a couple that are really long, because obviously if you've worked with a Python script with IDA before, that's something that's quite taxing on the processor. For example, Diaphora from Joshin Karet, that's a brilliant diffing tool, but Python's obviously slower than C++. So being able to have that power to port that over to a plugin is certainly awesome. I was joking, of course, about the plugin to do that, but that would be nice.
So you want to convert Python to C++?
Uh-oh, you got something?
Uh, Not exactly, but just because, some training data is not very much available. But
Right.
let me, for 1 second, I will discuss about that. Let me turn off the sharing for a second.
Yeah, sure. Let me take the screen off. There we go.
Yes, please.
Yep, you're up.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Troy, by the way, for joining as a member. That's awesome. That's how we can do things like these contests and all. Appreciate it. If someone earlier asked, I don't know if you can share, but what's some exciting things coming new in IDA Pro 9?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that have been discussed in the email most clients received.
Right.
The biggest thing I would say, you may please share the screen if you want.
Sure. You're up.
The biggest thing is IDA as a library, for example, and that as well will bring with it another framework on top of IDA Python. So people complain about the SDK is hard to use and IDA Python is not very consistent. So what I heard is there will be improvements, so it will be more Pythonic. So the same way here, I have my wrapper called IDA Python extensions, where I wrap a bunch of things and make things Pythonic on top of IDA Python. There will be an official library coming. So I'm assuming, so IDA is a library, Pythonic IDA Python framework. These are the biggest things. Yeah, I don't remember the other things, but that will be useful for people who want to automate. You want to link IDA into their main application, for example, or they want to say open the prompt and say import IDA lib, and then once you do that, you can query the database without having to use IDA at all. So that would be nice. You can use, for example, any other editor without having to remote into IDA. It will be within the same interpreter instance. So that's as well powerful. All right. So with respect to, so it's an opportunity just to talk about the GPTs I have, and that will give you some idea. Of course, I can improve things, but I haven't. But let me share a scenario real quick that you can. So for example, let's say here, I will try. Okay, I'll try. Let's see here. Right. Hello world C++ plugin. Okay, so here I programmed that GPT to use IDA CMake for me. So it also gives me the CMake, how to build it. And it is giving me the plugin source code.
Hmm.
And what I'm chatting with right now is with the GPT called IDA Pro C++ SDK and decompiler. This is the GPT. So it is specialized to work with C++. But there's a nice feature in ChatGPT where you can do the at mention. So if I say at and now switch to another GPT within the same session. And now I'm gonna ask the IDA Python coding assistant. So now IDA Python coding assistant is entered the chat, so to say. And I say, okay, give it in Python or give the equivalent in Python. So what it will do now, it will put the head of IDA Python, revise my chat, and try to give me the same, but in Python. So here I'm using combination between the C++ GPT and the Python GPT. So here, this is the port of it in Python. And you could have done the same as well for any other plugin. Of course, you need to do some fixing and so on. But let's see, for example, let's take here real quick. Let's take some snippets, see how well it does. Let's take some piece of code here, for example. Now I'm still in IDA Python. Also convert this to IDA Python. Here we go. And it is giving me the IDA Python equivalent. So you can start with either Python 1 or C++ 1, interact between the two, have them help you convert things and whatnot. So that's one automated way, so to say. So this
Yeah,
looks good to me. Yeah.
that's great. Good stuff.
All right. I have other demos. We can talk about the plugin as well. That's useful for, I would say, when you're working with obfuscated code that you try to clean as much as possible, but there's still some artifacts that you didn't clean up, and they're just simply polluting the output.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you say that because like 3 people have asked specifically about IDA Pro and obfuscated code. So good segue.
So this plugin is called Strike Out, and the gist of it is to help delete some lines. So this is, for example, I would say it's an opaque predicate. It's not necessarily, even if it enters, it doesn't do anything, but this is remnants of the obfuscated code. Now, I don't want this. It doesn't serve anything in the listing. With the strikeout plugin, I just delete. I hit delete and it deletes this. So now anything that I don't like, I can hide or delete. And so this will be very, very useful. For example, this as well may never enter. Let's suppose you can just simply delete the whole if statement, and you can nicely, let's say this one, you don't want this line and so on. So this will delete them without patching anything. It will simply hide the lines. But if I want to later really apply those patches, I can simply completely knock out those lines. So here I can then apply patch statements in queue. I forgot the hotkeys. Let's try to. Where are the actions? Okay, so I need to run a bunch of hotkeys first. Then what will happen is everything that I deleted, everything that I just removed, I can then go and apply patch, so they'll be knocked in the disassembly. So that's another thing. So you can either just hide them, or finalize the patch by noping out those statements. Another utility of this plugin, it works in the assembly window. So for example, let's say here, I select those, I should press Ctrl Shift Delete, and it will nop out those instructions, for example. So that can be as well useful. And then later, of course, if I want, I can produce the patch file, the diff file, and so I can apply it to the binary at the end. So we get a diff file, and this diff file is a standard patch file. And so there are lots of things that we can use to apply this. This is the physical offset, original byte, and patch byte. So
Do you
that's
find the patch application of a new binary and such to be quite better than it used to be in the past?
which one?
The generation of a patched binary from IDA, is it? I remember in the past, like quite a while ago, it used to be quite inconsistent and such.
I don't think it has changed. The produce diff file it has not changed. What
Okay.
has been added is I don't know. Maybe they improved that dialog. I don't remember. But this is the patched window dialog where you can selectively undo a patch. For example, here I just delete those. It will revert the patch, for example. But nothing has changed. I don't know.
Yeah, I've had problems in the past with like imports table construction and such, or that kind of thing. So, all right, Elias just dropped off for a moment. Hopefully, oh, there you are. Good. I thought I lost you.
Yeah, so this is strikeouts. I would like as well as part of productivity. This is something I would say almost built into IDA. So if you ask me what plugins do I use, since I don't do on a day-to-day basis malware reverse engineering or exploit development and so on, my plugin set is very limited. So I don't use much plugins. I probably use my own plugins, and that's it. So because now we don't have really much plugins, let's show you a scenario where suppose you're doing, let's say you're in a database, and let's hit tab here. And here we have uh, what looks like a compile. I don't know if it's compile time or not, but this is string encryption using those instructions, the XMM instructions here, to load part of the string on the stack. Here the v6 here is on the stack. Now they're not individual variables, but the decompiler doesn't know about them. They should be a long buffer. But this using the XMM instructions to fill in those, then they're gonna be doing XOR and so on to retrieve the final string. So v4 is the actual string. Let's try to guess the size. I'm gonna press tab here. RCX, RDX. Where is RDX? Okay, and here is the stack variable. Let's open the stack window and let's make this define as a byte, and let's make it, I think, this big here. Okay, and let's call this encrypted string. Now, of course, you're gonna say we can use a floss from Mandiant. We can use, I don't know, we can use this tool and that tool, and but what if the tools you're using don't necessarily help you? So I wanna be able to. So here again, still. All right, this is what it used to be. It's a string that's 96 characters long. It's gonna be loaded like this and XORed, and then this is the string we wanna reveal. Let's suppose you just like that, you run into this. You're disassembling, you hit this kind of thing. I want to see what's the string real quick with built-in IDA. So in that case, I will switch to, first I will select the box debugger. This is specialized to debug PE files and snippets. And I select the box debugger and go to the debugger options and make sure that it's configured as IDB mode. That means emulate anything in the database. So we don't care if the file is runnable. It could be a driver file, it could be a crash dump. As long as I have a database, I'm configuring this plugin to emulate the IDB content. Make sure it's 64-bit emulation. Okay, okay. Now I hit F9 to start the emulation. Now I'm in IDA debugger and I'm just simply single stepping. Of course, this will crash if we try to call do a syscall or
Yeah.
as long as what we're tracing is self-contained, this should work. So here, let it finish. So we can here right click, for example, show these are the registers that have been loaded, these guys. But I don't care about the implementation. Okay, now it supposedly executed those. Since this function is a fast call, so RCX is the first argument, RDX is the second argument. Here we can see RCX is a constant and RDX is the string. So let's follow it. So we press G to go to the second argument. And this is the string that we're looking at. So here we have simply emulated a piece of code, for example, real quick to get a certain answer. That will be very handy. Now,
Yeah.
we suppose that such scenario. So suppose you had something decrypt string, and let's suppose like that, for example, and here it does the decryption. And here you have your function main. And here you have a string, for example, and here the encrypted string. And here we have decrypt string as, for example. And not only that, we have that call to decrypt string all over the program, different strings, not the same string.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this specific scenario, so what I showed you is box is good because we can basically select a snippet in the middle of a function. I could have emulated only those instructions. But if I have a complete function, I can leverage it as a black box. Now, I don't have such an example right now, but I'm going to give you the example here with something else. So here, for example, I have a printf function, for example. Printf takes format and 3 dots. If that's the case, like you have a decrypt function, suppose so we have the decrypt string. In this case, I'm gonna demo on printf. So you're running the program. So here I'm let it run. I'm suspended in main. Supposedly, this is decrypt. This function is decrypt. It takes the argument. I can use this programmatically. So if I open the snippet window and let's show the console here, I can leverage. If it was decrypt, I could have simply renamed the function. If it was, if I have it, I can rename it and then call it decrypt string and give it the argument. But I don't have a decrypt function for now, but I am using a function inside the database. So here, for example, hello world. I am using that function as a black box function to do what I want. And this, I invoked that function. So instead of lifting a decryption function, if it is isolated in a self-contained piece of code that we can invoke,
Yeah.
well, I can simply call it and use it to my own benefits. And I'll show you an example later on for the malware where it does resolve APIs by hash. We don't have to lift the hashing method. I can simply call the hashing method externally. So
That's super cool.
yeah. So these are the box snippets, essentially. We can select any piece of code and simply emulate it, which also works, for example, here in one of the videos, I showed a crash dump. So here, let's suppose you're working with a crash dump. This is a crash dump. You can open a crash dump in IDA, by the way. So all you have to do is simply open the crash dump. This is a crash dump. I have access to WinDebug. Here, this is a WinDebug. I can type anything I want, like list modules, for example, and these stuff. And if I want to emulate any piece of code, I can as well. Let's suppose I want to emulate this piece of code. It's going to be the same story. I will have to simply switch debuggers from WinDebug to Box, and then run the emulator on top of it. So I'm gonna open a database that's already annotated here. And so this database is from a crash dump, WinDebug. Let's run it. When you run a crash dump file, IDA will simply load it from when you run a crash dump file, IDA will open it and show you the WinDebug access to it. So here I think this is the address. I'm gonna go back to the original one here and start fresh. So let's start from nothing. All right. Okay. All right. For example, here, this is a VM protected program. This is an obfuscated API call, and it's gonna eventually resolve somewhere. We need to emulate this piece of code just to get an answer real quick. So I don't know what's the answer for those. So in that case, for example, let's mark this location. And I will first convert the WinDebug session to capture it into a database. So when we use WinDump or WinDebug with a crash dump, IDA simply opens the crash dump, doesn't materialize the crash dump content into the database unless I take a memory snapshot. Now, if I stop debugging, I have everything in the crash dump materialized into the database. Now I can use a combination of two plugins, debuggers. So now I switch to Box, go to Box, make sure it's IDB mode and 64-bit emulation. And let's jump to the marked location, put breakpoint, hit F9. And now we're gonna emulate this to see where it goes to. So this is using IDA, built-in IDA, not much. We're not using Flare Emu or Unicorn or anything. We're just first trying to get by with what IDA gives us out of the box. So here, I'm starting the debugging from this point on. Let's just step. And finally, we'll see it's gonna return. And this is the API call. This is how we did the emulation. So now, for example, I can go back and fix it. So here, for example, I can rename this to internet close handle, for example, and I resolved the obfuscated API call. Similarly, here there seems to be another API call. So all I have to do is simply right-click, change the IP address, and continue emulating from this point onwards. And this is internet close handle. Of course, I showed in my videos as well how to automate how to get all the obfuscated APIs for VM Protect. I broke down the logic into multiple pieces, the discovery, the resolution, the tracing, and so on. So in IDA, we can do instruction decoding, detecting certain patterns, using the debugger programmatically, patching, and so on. So this is Box for as well snippets in conjunction with the crash dump. Similarly, on the same topic, for example, let's say we have a UPX program. I want to quickly fix it, get the unpacking with IDA. Well, we can also use the Box plugin for this one. So simply select the Box plugin and run it. and we should be able to unpack it and clean it up, for example. Okay, so this is the UPX packer. Now I know it should be jumping to original entry point at at some point towards the end here. This is the entry point jump. We can let it run. Eventually it will unpack itself, and this is all under emulation. So I don't have a full Windows VM or anything. This is just a minimal operating system. It should be faster than that unless there's something wrong, but it should finish and it should reach that point. So this is it. We reached that point. But before we continue, if I open the imports window, this is a packed program. So I don't have anything in the imports window. I don't have functions, like there's just one function. So this is not really the full program. But this is the actual program here. So I can, for example, let's take a snapshot. We can take memory snapshot all the loader segments. So they have been unpacked. Now we can restore them. We can capture them fresh value loader segments. This will capture the unpacked program. And then we will simply clean it up. We'll figure out where are the imports. We're gonna clean up the imports, massage the database, and we have a nice program. So here, for example, if we can find a pattern to an API call, I'm assuming somewhere here they're doing API calls. Yes, Q. This is an API call. These are all API calls. So we have to find the boundaries of the API calls. So for example, let's try to guess. I'm assuming this is as well part of an API. No, not yet. Maybe here.
What is it that you're doing to make it display that when it is an API call?
I'm just making Control O just to show it as an offset.
Okay.
But I'm trying to find the boundaries, like where does it first show, where does it finish, where does it start, and this is a generic approach. Doesn't have to be anything related to UPX. Just the idea is okay. We finished unpacking. We assume the APIs have been resolved into the import address table. We have to go find the IAT beginning. So I'm trying to find, for example, here. Okay, I don't know where's the boundaries. We try to, I'm gonna make arrays. So one approach is I will just find one pointer, make an array, and let's make it, for example, 200. And here I have all the pointers. Let's make it 140, for example. So I have a bunch I still have here, and this is it. But I think there's a bit maybe before as well. Let's see if there's anything else here. That's it. I would assume that the import table starts from here and finishes here, for example. So now I can edit segment create and call this iData. And this is now the iData. Let's capture that segment. And I don't need the array. I just get rid of the array. And I can also change the segment class to extern. I think extr, sorry, xtr. And that will change the display. So these are nice, look like exports, but they don't have names. So as well, we can select all of them and rename them quickly. So what we want to rename every address to, let's say this one is close handle and so on. So we can also, I'm gonna press Alt F9 and run a script inside IDA, which is an IDC script. It has been with IDA since 20 years at least. It's called rename imports. And all it does is simply rename all the functions, the addresses here. So this is a semblance of import table. This approach works for non-PE programs. What we're doing is really enhancing the database, cleaning up the database. Now, this is not enough. I still have to here, this is the jump to the entry point. So this is the entry point. We can call this start, for example. Now it's called start 0, but this is the real entry point. We can now simply reanalyze the whole program, apply signatures, and we have everything cleaned up. So here now, if I go to start 0 and let's Alt L, begin selection, and let's say here end selection, and undefine everything. And we can try right click here, reanalyze program. And here as well, I should have destroyed everything. So to give it a chance to analyze it properly. And IDA's analyzing here now. The program used to be packed. Now it's starting to discover functions and so on. Look here, the analysis is happening. We have imports. We already as well have cross references to the imports. It's looking good. It's still analyzing. Here we can see it's analyzing. And finally, when it analyzes, look, it's way better than we started with a packed program. Now it discovered everything. It's gonna finish. And when it finishes, we're gonna apply signatures, and that will make it even better. So we started with a packed program. We used Box plugin to do some emulation to let it unpack itself. We took memory snapshots. We cleaned the database. We cleaned the segment, the import segment. And now when it finishes the analysis, for example, we can check the types. So the types are correct. But I don't think I downloaded any signatures. So if I press Shift F5, this is not a good signature. So let's load the VC64 RTF. And hopefully this should find, come on, it should find more. It should find more signatures. Maybe it didn't, but okay, I'll try again. Huh, weird. Normally it should find more, but this is the program. Now that we have let it unpack itself, this is the program. All we have to do now is just analyze it. We have uncovered the API calls, we have unpacked the code, we have most of the functions recovered. Everything is good. And remember, we started from a packed program. We didn't have anything at all. Now we did the cleanup, and we have nice this whole nice functions, regular functions. We have all the functions. We have the imports nicely discovered, which we didn't have before, and so on as well. So we used Box, and we used some techniques to clean up the database.
Yeah, that's amazing material. You're like, it's like a whole course day crammed into like 30 minutes for that session right there alone. I appreciate it so much. It's great.
Yeah. The time flew by so fast. Honestly, yeah, I had so many demos, but I think this could be enough. I would love to take some questions.
Yeah, for sure. Let me go back. I know I didn't want to cut you off of some parts. So Ahmed asks, can you delete a pattern in the bytecode using strikeout?
Delete a pattern
Yeah, in the bytecode using
in the
strikeout.
bytecode. Well, I mean, for example, if there's a pattern, in that sense, I would say so first to see the pattern, we'll have to go to the options and press 8 or show opcodes. Let's show enough. Let's say 8. If this will now let me find patterns. So now I can see patterns. For example, let's say this pattern I want to get rid of everywhere in the program. So Alt B to search for binary, and let's see how many. Let's find all occurrences, see how many of this. Unfortunately, there's only one. But if there's a pattern, I don't know where I can find some repeating pattern. But if you have a pattern, you capture the bytes, you can search for them. You will have the results, and then you will have to jump to the result and Control Shift Delete, for example. So this is not sustainable with Strikeout, since Strikeout is more manual. What you do instead is just a combination of API calls. So bin find a binary pattern and patch bytes accordingly.
Okay, great. And Akimbo asks, in disassembly, how would someone automate the collection and updating of variables? You run the program with IDA debugger, and all the arguments and variables for each function are updated if the code block is hit. Does that make sense?
No,
So
no.
how do you automate the updating of variables and such in the debugger when the code block is hit?
Okay, look, I'm gonna try to answer, but I don't have full understanding.
Sure, no worries.
Let's try something. Maybe we're talking about maybe um, watch window or something. So let's try because you mentioned debugger updating variables. So let's assume we're talking about watches. Let's gonna start debugging, for example. And I have here a stack variable. It's the argument count. I can, for example, follow it, make a oh, wait, let's let it set up the frame correctly, and now we can follow it. Okay, this is the variable. We can call it, let's say, argc, for example. But what we want here, debugger, and for example, add watch at this location. And now I can keep an eye on this one or any other variable as I debug. So if this is gonna change, which this is not gonna change, but if it's gonna change, we're gonna see it. So you can add as many watches as you want, and they'll simply be updated as we trace.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Akimbo. Good stuff. Ahmed asks, I would like to know how to use IDA Clang to parse C++ source code. Is that possible?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so uh, tu- 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 so here I'm using some material from my training. Uh, for example, here let's say I have a header file, and actually, let me see if I can find something better real quick. Let's try to find. Let's try to find a vector maybe. Yeah, that's a good example here. Okay, that's a very good example. And here doing it programmatically, but so let's suppose I have this. So this uses the STL that can parse normally unless we use Clang. So normally we should be able to load file, parse C header file, and by default it uses the built-in IDA header parser, which is not good enough. So what we do, we go to the option, compiler, and here the source parser by default is the IDAS one. It's not strong, so it's really can fail quickly. Instead, we can switch to the Clang one. And when we switch to the Clang one, we still have to select some flags to the Clang parser. This will dictate the pointer sizes and so many things that will influence the sizes of the structures we're parsing. So and IDA has some presets. For example, Windows, here, Windows 64-bit, it gives me the flags. So these are standard Clang flags. If we were gonna parse with Clang, minus X CPP to enable C++, we can specify the C++ standard level, C++ 17 support, etc. So this is a good command line argument I can pass to Clang. Now that we switch the default parser, press OK. And I want to as well try to do something better. let's save some time typing and use here write a quick example of inheritance and virtual methods. Say shape, circle, and rectangle, C++. I'm gonna use this as well and just take the opportunity to quickly talk about C++ reversing real quick as well, just at a higher level. So we're gonna use this code as well, just to show you how powerful the Clang parser is. I'm gonna put some stuff here. So we have a structure that uses stl. We have a class with this. Let's also add void f1. It does something. Regular non-virtual method. And we have a subclass. I'm gonna keep it as header file, so we're not gonna implement anything. And same for here. We quickly have a discussion about this kind of topic. So, okay, hopefully this is a parsable header file. All right, so we have this. We have a class with virtual methods. Let's add some members. And we have some inheritance. Okay. Now let's parse this file. Now I have so many IDA instances open. Let's switch back here. Let's use this one. Okay. All right. So let's suppose this is a database. I have an idea, or let's say this is a firmware where I don't have the source code of the firmware, but I do have the library file and the header files, but not the source code. Just because I have the header files, this is gonna be of great help for me. So the first thing is I would simply parse the header files. That will bring in all the structures used by the closed source binary. So we're gonna now that I switch to this parser, all I have to do is press Ctrl F9 or file load and parse C header file, and simply this should work now because we're using the Clang parser, which is much more powerful than IDES parser. All right. Okay, we have an issue. If this normally expected Clang or newer. I ran into this before. I don't remember what I did for it. Okay, let's try to up the standard here. Let's see what's the Clang command line argument to specify C++. Let's say 17. I forgot the. What was it? Okay, the minus std 17. Let's try.
For those of you who often ask how AI can help you on a day-to-day stuff with reversing and such, this is a perfect example right here.
Yeah, so many things, honestly. And we're not necessarily sharing private stuff. We're not pasting sensitive data. We're asking generic questions that you would Google usually.
Yep.
Oh. Look, I don't know what's the issue here, but I will see if I can just hack it real quick. Here, what line was it? Okay. Bear with me. Let's see this one. 898. If it's less than 17, well, whatever. I don't know how to fix it, but let's see. This notepad doesn't have jump to line, huh?
Nah, nope, not the original Notepad.
898. But I did specify the C++ standard here. I put 17. Let's
Yeah, don't
try
worry
it.
about it if it takes too long.
It shouldn't be doing this issue, but it is important. I would like to work with this example. It will show a lot of things. Try as admin. Yes. Don't save. Do I have the code here? All right. Okay. Be quick. Normally, I have my knowledge base, and I would like look at the errors and so on. Okay, so if define this, and if, all right, let's try.
Yeah, real quick, we're over 1,700 people watching live, so I'm putting up Elias's YouTube channel again. So make sure you give it a follow. It's definitely, clearly a good one to follow. So
Okay, all right, let's try last one here. But that will illustrate a bunch of things. Okay, I didn't like the workaround, but I remember there's a trick. Anyway, so it parsed successfully. Now what we need to look at, what we were looking at was STL something. This is a worthwhile discussing. So what are we gonna be looking at? We're gonna be looking at, this is really powerful, especially if you know the layout of the classes. So we did parse this header file. For example, STL example. Let's first press Shift F1 to go to the types and Control L and STL example. All right. So look what happened. So for example, when you include std vector, or even as it is, you weren't aware of alignment. So here, for example, we have the padding. The std vector int, it got specialized. So we have exactly the vector int specialization. We have a character specialization. So std, for example, set character, its own type specialized. So if you were to do this by hand to figure out how to expand that template, it's going to be difficult. Now we simply give it the type, and IDA, the parser, will tell IDA how to create that type nicely. So this structure here, if you ask me, with all my experience, what size of STL example, I wouldn't know. I don't know even how big is string, for example, or how big this will be because it's templatized. But
right,
now, for example, this structure we know exactly is 50. And that would be helpful. Let's suppose the code internally had something like auto v equal new STL example. You might see something behind the scenes in the disassembly, something like malloc and 50, for example, followed by a call to the constructor and so on and so on. But when you see 50 and it lines up with your structure, you're good. So this is using Clang. Now, one last thing as well is for the shape here. This is a base class, and it has virtual methods. And I thought, yeah, it has members as well. There will be something tricky because for such classes, we will have the data members, and we'll have a virtual table structure associated with this one. So let's take a look at the shape. So Control L, let's show how the shape looks like. So while the data members are here for ints, but we also have the vtable. And when we parsed it, the vtable automatically got introduced correctly. That lines up with the binary layout. So when we call this we will see when we want to call a virtual method, we will see code that dereferences the virtual table from the first offset of the class instance, and then it will call the methods there. So by simply using libclang here, we automatically got the proper layout. We got the data members coming after the v table. Circle in this case inherits and adds one member, and circle, let's see, did it introduce its own? It did not introduce its own one, but its own methods, it's overriding. But here as well, circle v table apparently got introduced, rectangle v table, and so on. So if you have the header file, you can do a lot. You can parse them and nicely disassemble the closed source program that you're dealing with. So even IDA itself, let's say IDA becomes easy to reverse, although it's against the end user license agreement. But we do have the header files, and we have the libraries, or even the IDA kernel, the IDA DLL. We should be able, with the header files, all the header files, we parse them one by one. It should become super easy to take a look at IDA. So this is mainly libclang, and you can also create. I'm not sure. Yeah, I did download them. So you can go to the IDA support or download center. You can download the IDA Clang standalone utilities. I put them next to the SDK, and we have here IDA Clang, and this will let us parse and then basically generate a TIL file. So we can do that once and for all. So for example, let's copy this one here and create a type info library. So IDA Clang, we need to specify the command line arguments and the header file. It will generate a type library. So we can share this type library or simply add it to IDA if we are repeatedly parsing this. We don't want to parse anymore. So for example, here IDA Clang, let's see if this will work. Okay, it needs to be put next to IDA. All right, let's copy this one as well. Put it next to IDA. All right, and here I generated a type information library file. So now I can simply copy this one, go to IDA till, and let's say paste it here. And now if I start IDA fresh, suppose I just do IDA, and we can press Shift F11, insert, and now I have a type library for whatever header files I created for. And so for example, for this one, if I wanted to have something bigger, I may have a root header file, and then I'll have it include header1.h, include header2.h. So if I am building, let's say, an IDA SDK type information library, I need to parse all those files. I can simply make a single header file including all those files. So I can make something called IDA SDK.hpp, for example. So here you can say /b into IDA SDK.h, for example. And here I just have to, let's say include, and we should be good to go. So for example, by doing this, I can simply create IDA SDK type information library that will now give me all the IDA structures, so I can reverse IDA plugin or anything IDA related, because I have all the structures and constants ready to be consumed directly in IDA. And that's what IDA Hexrays, that's what they do. If we go to the type information, all the TIL files, this is what they do behind the scenes. So they go to the header files, macOS SDK, and they generate those files. They ship them with IDA, and these really almost 50% of IDA sizes go into type information library. The signatures take not too much, but yeah, the till is the most biggest thing in IDA.
Wow, that's an awesome answer to a question. I really appreciate that. I know we're going to wrap it up here. I just wanted to get one last one in, but don't worry about demoing. Just like a verbal response on this one is totally fine. It's just, and I'm not sure if you know this one since you don't do much vulnerability research and such, but he's asking a question around patch diffing. Is there a way to sync the function prototype from older versions to a new one? Bin diff, as an example, just syncs the function name, and I also want the argument types and names.
Yeah. Well, I think what I would do is, I'm not gonna demo, but for example, here's a small snippet that prints the prototype of all functions. What I would do is simply go for all functions, so get all the functions, get the type information for every function, and then maybe emit it to intermediary file, which just like function name and prototype, then read it, and instead of get type info, just set type info, for example. So programmatically, I would do it programmatically by retrieving it from one end and applying it in another end.
Yeah, good stuff. So, wow, Elias, this is a fantastic session. If you didn't already teach, I would say you should be an instructor because you're great at it. Are you
Thank you.
teaching any more classes coming up? I know you said you're not doing it this year for hex rays, but anything in the future?
Maybe next year. Right now, I'm focusing on the channel, but I would love to go back to training again. Yes. I'm thinking maybe workshop format, like a 2-hour session, for example, specific
Yeah.
topic. I think that I can do more often with my work schedule.
Yeah, again, I thought I was good at IDA, but I'm blown away by your stuff. So I'll definitely take your class.
Thank you.
Here is Elias's channel again. All things IDA. Is there another one to share, or is this good?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, yeah, definitely give him a follow. I'm sure you're blown away as I am on this one. So appreciate it. Thank you so much. I know not been under the weather a bit, so thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, and I guess last things, thanks so much to the new members, especially the ones on this stream here. Thanks, Setsuo, I think how you pronounce your handle, for being the first platinum sponsor on the channel. I appreciate that. And S joined as a gold sponsor, made another join as well. So thank you so much. And a donation from, I think it was Canada, I'm not sure, but thank you for that. And congratulations again to the winners. I will get an email out to you after this session in a little bit, after I take a little break. And then, yeah, next week we got a session on looking at more detail and going in depth on basically using emulation for looking at obfuscated code and such. So looking forward to that one and spend some time there. But finally, again, one more time, thank you so much, Elias, and we will see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.